Hello Watchers and Witch Tears, my name is TV Skyen, and here's something we haven't done on the channel for a while. A good old-fashioned lore reading. Just reading some League of Legends lore and talking about it and the ways in which it's written and the stuff that it might have to say about some of the characters that are involved. And a wonderful opportunity to do this has presented itself recently because The Dream Thief by Matt Dunn was published not too long ago, and it's a story all about Lissandra and her life in the Frostguard Citadel and what she, gets up to as the Queen Ice Witch of the Freljord who carries around terrible dark secrets about the past and all that kind of stuff. Surely, that must be an interesting life to look in on. So, what we're going to be doing in this video is we're just going to be reading this, all of this, from start to finish, and every once in a while, when I see something interesting or something that I want to point out or talk about, then I'll just stop and talk about it. So this will be like an audiobook with a lot of interruptions, and I hope that you'll join me for that. The Ice Witch does not sleep in her citadel. She sleeps anywhere and everywhere and nowhere, sometimes all at once. The cavernous place where she now chooses to lay her body down for a few hours could hold 1,000 fortresses. A veritable sea of true ice stretches from underground horizon to underground horizon. They're not the horizons of the tumultuous world above, but closer, much closer, to an entirely different kind of madness. She visits this place often, and always by herself, but she is never alone. Some called them monsters, some called them gods. Regardless, the vast shadows that slumber beneath the icy blanket can only dream. Lissandra checks in dutifully, makes sure their bedding is comfortable. The Watchers must not awaken. So, first nitpick, and there's going to be plenty of these along the way. And this is a very specific thing. So this intro, the point and purpose of it is to give you a little bit of a, well, first of all, to tell you what's going on and where Lissandra is. We're in the underground fortress vault where there's lots of true ice and frozen Watchers. But it's also to give us a little bit of a build-up to what exactly it is that Lissandra is going to be doing. She's going to be trying to prevent the frozen Watchers from, as it were, unfreezing. Now, when you are a freaking lore nerd like me, you already know all of this. Like, everything here, all of this stuff, well, maybe not that bit, but like, most of the information that's being communicated here is stuff that I already know, that I already understand. And so, my reaction to this intro, and which is like, it's quite long, frankly, before we get into the air quotes action, is to go be a little bit impatient and go like, yeah, enough exposition, get to the good bits. And that's sort of a side effect of this thing not being written for me. This is a general thing with the lore that Riot writes for League of Legends, is that ideally, anyone who's interested should be able to go onto the universe, click on a champion's page, and say, oh, they have a short story, I'll click on that one and read it, and they should, like, more or less be able to jump in and more or less be able to comprehend what's going on without having to, like, trek through a wiki or, like, look up one of my under crits videos about League of Legends lore in order to understand what's going on. The side effect of that is that dedicated readership, like people who read all of the lore, weird nerds like me, kind of, there's some parts of it where we're just like, yeah, but, like, get on with it. And that's sort of what's going on with this intro. The other thing that's going on is that there's an interesting little structural device, which we'll talk about in a little bit. She lost her eyes so long ago, so it is her mind that traces their sleeping forms. What she sees has always chilled her beyond the concerns of flesh and bone, so that she no longer shivers at the touch of ice against her skin. When she's down here, her blindness is a blessing. It is horror enough to feel their presence, to walk in their dreams, to know what it is they desire for this world. And so, she must keep them dreaming. One of them has begun to stir. Lissandra sensed it with the last new moon, hoping against hope that it would settle itself once more. But now its abyssal intelligence squirms against the others, growing ever more restless. She removes her helm, her ceremonial robes fall around her ankles, and she pads out across the frozen emptiness beyond. I'm not sure if it's implied that she's, like, fully naked here, but if it is, that's kind of cool, actually. Like, that's because one of the things that's happening in the story, like, Lissandra, in most of the lore, is not really a particularly vulnerable character. Like, she's the Ice Witch. She's always clad in, like, this dark helmet, and she's got this big, black, like, really kind of campy villain dress on, and she's got the true ice that's kind of rippling around her all the time. She's encasing herself in the tomb. Like, she's always been very much like someone whose appearance and aesthetic communicates invulnerability, but in this story, we get to see Lissandra be very vulnerable indeed. Now, I suspect that the writer couldn't, like, oh yeah, she's naked now, there's just ice titties all over the place. But the implication here is that she is removing her defenses. Like, she's making herself, like, she gets rid of the helmet, the ceremonial robes, the emblems of her office, as it were, and now she is vulnerable. And I like that. I like that a lot. Lissandra splays her fingers across the ice. Her hair hangs over her face, hiding the lines of age. And by the way, the lines of age? Really? Okay, the lines of age, you say. Have you taken a look at Lissandra's character model recently? Look at that character model and tell me where the frick the lines of age are on that character. And that's been one of my complaints about Lissandra for a long time, is that, like, you have the ancient witch who dominates the world character, and you had to give her, like, glassy, smooth skin and make her look like vaguely 32 or something. Like, I really, this nonsense here, this is the cool stuff to me. Like, that's the stuff that I'd like to see on her splash art and her character model. Just little, like, scars and lines of age kind of poking out under the rim of the helmet, like, showing that there is, like, this secret personality behind the helmet that she's trying to hide behind the perfect facade. Like, anyway, her hair hangs over her face, hiding the lines of age and the scarred ruin of her empty eyes. She learned long ago the secret ways to walk in dreams, to traverse the impossible distances of this harsh land in moments, back and forth 100 times before each new dawn. Sometimes she forgets where her physical body is. Her mind drifts down, now, through the barrier. She muses briefly at the thickness of the true ice. To place the entire burden of faith upon glass is pure folly, and yet there is no other choice. That there, by the way, that's a good sentence. To place the burden of faith upon glass is pure folly. I think it could be shortened, like, instead of to place the entire burden of faith upon glass is pure folly, I could say to place the burden of faith upon glass is folly. That would make it a little snappier, but I like the combination here. Like the burden of faith upon glass. Glass is brittle. Placing a burden on it, that's probably stupid. Like, it works just linguistically. On the other side, the Watcher is all teeth and darkness and chittering, frustrated anticipation. It is bigger than a mountain. Is it one of the small ones? Lissandra hopes so. She has never dared probe the defenses of the largest, the ones that seem able to devour gravity and time itself, eaters of not only worlds but entire planes of reality. They make her feel very small and insignificant, like a single mote of frost in a blizzard. She focuses on the great and terrible creatures before her. Its dream becomes hers. And here's where we can talk about that little structural thing that's going on in the intro here, because the intro, like I said, this is not really written for the lore buffs who already know everything. This is written for people who need the exposition and the introduction into the world of the Frost Garden Lissandra, and sort of they need a little bit of easing into this weird and esoteric fantasy world. So what's being done here, is there sort of a management of chunks. So here we have a chunk, right? This is a chunk of like exposition and sort of the setup and where are you and what's going on. And then we get a mission statement. The Watchers must not awaken. This is the whole plot of the entire story, is Lissandra is trying to make sure that the Watchers do not awaken. So we get a big chunk of exposition and stuff, and then we get this little summary saying, okay, this is the point of all of that. Like, this right here is the point of all of that, and so you can kind of, oh, okay, we tie a little bow around it, and then we move on. And so we get the next little chunk here. We get a bunch of stuff about sort of dream walking and very weird esoteric stuff, and so she must keep them dreaming. The Watchers must not awaken, and so she must keep them dreaming. Right? And then we get another really big chunk all the way down here. And then we get this, its dream becomes hers. Like, and so we have these three sentences that kind of outline exactly what's going on in the story. The Watchers must not awaken, she must keep them dreaming. In order to do that, she walks in their dream. Like, she does what the title of the story says, the dream thief. She steals their dreams, like she steals dreams from others and feeds them to the beasts. And that's, structurally speaking, that's just a really good way to, like, to say a bunch of really weird esoteric stuff that can be kind of hard to get into if you're not into it already, but to also just give the reader a little moment of breathing space to go, oh yeah, okay, right, this is, okay, I see, I get it, we can move on. And that's something that I see a lot, especially in fantasy stories, especially in early parts of fantasy stories. The writer is like, oh god, I need to get people on board with all of this massive fantasy world I've got going on, and they can easily overwhelm a new reader by saying, okay, you need to understand this magic system, and these, like, this is the system of laws in this fantasy kingdom, and here are all the different social classes, and, like, and when you have to deliver a bunch of, like, stuff that can be kind of alienating to someone who hasn't bought into it, little structural devices like this, like to manage the pacing, to give that little breathing room to a reader, can be a really good way to do that, and I really like that in this story. Another Lissandra waits for her there, in the dreamscape. This ageless being towers behind a black sun, the strands of her hair floating into the heavens, her eyes whole, crystal blue, and shining all with the celestial energies of the world's final dawn. She's beautiful. She's a goddess. She's struggling to press the sun down below the horizon. The fiery black orb fights back, trying to rise again. It burns the goddess's fingers. She sees long unshadows falling over mountains blanketed with frozen ashes. This land is a mockery of the Freljord, devoid of all life and magic. So, another little device here. This is a dream moment. Like this, the stuff that she's seeing here is dream visions. This is like the weird depths of the psyche creating evocative but also kind of impenetrable imagery that kind of has to be interpreted thematically. So in order to tell the reader, okay, you shouldn't maybe take all of this completely literally, just cursive, like just slant the letters a little bit, write them in a style that is visibly different, and you tell the reader, okay, you need to switch your mind over to another mode of understanding. And I like the prose here generally, like I like the imagery, like that once she sees the dream that the watcher has, it sort of enters this weird psychic dreamscape full of kind of terrifying imagery. Like, imagine yourself having that dream, where, like, another you is there, who is huge, like the size of a world, struggling to hold down a sun with the hair, like, spreading out across the horizon in a black sun in this unreal dreamscape. Like, that once you start to imagine this imagery, first of all, it looks like it could be airbrushed on the side of a panel van, which is, I've always found that to be kind of a good aesthetic for certain kinds of fantasy. But secondly, it also sounds like a really freaking scary dream. Like, it sounds like something that you wake up from, like, holy shit, what the fuck did all of that mean? And you're paranoid for the rest of the day. That kind of thing. Anyway, life. Life is the key. The living souls of the Freljord, this icy land that Lissandra once offered in sacrifice to the beasts below. She leads the stirring watcher away from its own dark thoughts as gently as she can, and tries to soothe it with the dreams of others. And so, another little visual device, we get a literal split in the story telling us, okay, whatever is here, there's some kind of gap in space and time between here and there. So you don't have to say take this as a direct continuation. And again, the same thing with the cursive. Or the italics, not cursive, italics. It's called, in Danish word processors, it's always called cursive, for whatever health reason. The tribe is split across 3 camps. It is this way because the Iceborn War Mother decrees it so, to hedge against an assassin's blade, she says, so that none will know in which tent she slumbers. Glacier underfoot, stars overhead. The priest marks his observations on a fold of cured elnuk skin by candlelight, upon an icy outcropping. His hand is steady and bold. He must send his notes each night to the Frostguard citadel. He wonders, does power mask paranoia? He sees his breath and knows he's not alone. Shame constricts his throat. Dutifully, he reaches for a strip of cloth to honor Lissandra, the greatest of the 3. After all the oaths he spoke, only her gaze would ever bring such a chill to his heart. Do not bind your eyes, she says, emerging from the night's shadow. Her voice is steady and cold. Forgive me, he says. I am late. My reports are... It is not your words I seek. You are dreaming. I need you to listen. Listen to the ice. The frost priest's eyes widen at what he hears. The ice hungers. No, not the ice. Something beneath it? What does it mean? He asks, but Lissandra is gone. The priest awakens. He ruminates on the dream. He pledged to serve, freeze, and bleed blindly. He reaches for the strip of cloth and binds his eyes. Before dawn breaks, he's miles away from the War Mother and her 3 camps, and Lissandra drifts away into another's dream. So 2 things are happening here. First of all, like, Lissandra is basically feeding other people's dreams to the Watchers in the Abyss, and she's kind of inflicting what's being done to her to other people. She's literally sacrificing other people's minds a little bit to the void in order to satiate it and make it not wake up. Just sleep a little longer. You can sleep in. You can hit the snooze on your alarm clock. You don't need to wake up and consume the world yet. Look, here's the mind of a human person that I'm going to offer to you and make them slightly insane because of it. That's the one part. The other part is a little bit of world building for the Freljord. We get to know over the course of this, oh hey, Lissandra has this group of frost priests who report to her and who are extremely loyal to her and who do weird ritual stuff in her favor, so we get a sense of what kind of a leader Lissandra might be from that kind of thing. And we also get to hear a little bit about, like, it is this way because the Iceborn War Mother decrees it so to hedge against an assassin's blade. Oh, okay, so the Freljord has a lot of War Mothers being assassinated, so they need to guard against that kind of thing. Like, it does a lot of subtle world building for the kind of place that the Freljord is. Without getting into an expositional lore dump, it tells you something about the world that the characters are inhabiting. I've got hiccups. I always get hiccups at the worst possible times. 7 ice hawks take flight across a blue sky, scattering the frosts from their feathers. The dismal fang of a mountain, and that's a good phrase as well, the dismal fang of a mountain. Like, imagine a mountain with a dismal fang, like the peak, but it's dismal, it's kind of sucks. That's, oh, lovely, good imagery. Over a beach of rounded grey stones, descending into the shallows of the sea. The little girl, no one remembers her name but her, walks alone. She picks up a crab. It's black with square eyes swiveling atop its head. She holds it carefully, its legs tickling the palm of her hand. She looks up to see a chunk of ice floating in the dark water, carried to land on near-frozen tides. It bumps onto the rocky shore and begins to melt. Inch by inch, it shrinks away to reveal the form of a woman, curled in a cradle of ice, a thing born of winter. The girl drops the crab. Lissandra arises from the breaking waves like a witch! The girl shrieks. A gale of ice and snow and searing cold bursts from her mouth. The witch vanishes, and only the little girl crying a blizzard remains. Again, lovely imagery, like a person crying out a blizzard. That's interesting, like that's cool imagery. Again, we're in a dreamscape. We're on a coast, we're dealing with like this abstract coastline full of gray rocks underneath a dismal mountain, which as imagery goes is really interesting because water especially is like signifier of change, signifier of the deep dark unknown. Like, if you wanted to do psychological analysis on the dream imagery here, you probably could, and it's a lovely detail. It's not super important though, but it's the kind of detail that's there if you want to go looking for it. She wakes with a start beside a dying fire, surrounded by other sleeping children. They are the ones orphaned upon the Freljord's reddening snow. And again, lovely use of imagery here. They are the ones orphaned upon the Freljord's reddening snow. So that's, like, again, imagery here, but the interpretation is pretty simple. Oh, red snow, that means blood. Blood has been spilled. Okay, so they're orphans who are children of all the war and murder that is happening in the Freljord. Again, much like the previous section, you get a little bit of subtle world building for, okay, so the Freljord is a place that has a lot of orphans then. Oh dear, that tells you something about what the Freljord is like. A stern-looking woman watches over them, an axe strapped to her back. They all know she would die for them. An ember pops from the hearth, landing in the shabby furs of the girl's feet. She touches it with her finger. It freezes solid in an instant. So, crying a blizzard is maybe not just dream imagery, but perhaps a literal sensation of what she feels inside. She can freeze things solid with her finger in an instant. So the anxiety that you would have about that is, what if you open your mouth and freeze everyone you love solid? So that's good imagery for a nightmare. Already walking into another dream, Lissandra knows to watch this child. She is iceborn, perhaps a new weapon for the war to come, or a new enemy. High up in the mountains, it is not the deep cold that has laid this poor traveler low. It is his own ignorance. He hunches in a shallow cave. He hums because he can no longer sing the songs of his youth to comfort himself. He cannot bear to inhale the icy air. His beard, white with frost and frozen snot, lovely. Again, like the use of imagery here, because we have all like most of the language in this is kind of heightened. Like it's kind of poetic language. It's like, oh, it's very fancy and fine words. And then occasionally we dip out of sort of the highfalutin dreamscape imagery, and we get something like this: frozen snot in a white frozen beard. Like this is just kind of worldly and disgusting. And I've always, and I don't even know if it's intentional, but for me, those little things, like when sometimes a writer just remembers to put in, oh yeah, and by the way, like this person farts, or like, oh, they stink of sweat. Like little things that let you know that the characters that you're involved with are flesh and blood and full of slime and goop and bodily fluids. Like those little things for me ground fantasy narratives a lot. When you have a character in a story who has a trouble with frozen snot, nice. Anyway, his beard, white with frost and frozen snot, makes it painful to open his lips, now blue and cracked. He cannot feel his legs nor his hands. He no longer shivers. He's too far gone. He has surrendered. The freeze will take his heart, and then it will be over. It's not the end he desired, but he feels warm, free. To the fair lands, to the sunshine. The lyrics slide dully around his brain. Instead of snow and ice, he sees green pastures. He can feel the summer breeze in his hair. Lissandra approaches the man from the back of the shallow cave. She can see the death in his fingers and toes spreading slowly. He will not awaken again. This will be his final dream. She places a hand on his shoulder. No one should have to be alone in their final moments. Your people are waiting for you, friend, she whispers. Lay down in the long grass. I will watch over you while you rest. He looks up at her. He smiles and nods. He looks younger. Then he closes his eyes and drifts away. Lissandra remains on the edge of his dream until the dream is no more. Here's another important moment, and this is the one I found actually most interesting in the entire story, because this is a moment of unambiguous compassion from Lissandra. And that's interesting, because that's not really a quality that we would normally associate with Lissandra herself, because she's the Ice Witch of the Freljord. She commands a cult of loyal followers who, let's be real, kind of fuck shit up for absolutely everybody else in the Freljord. She takes people prisoner, and she sacrifices them to ancient deities, and it's like bad person, sort of overall, but also someone with the capacity for empathy and kindness. Like, yeah, she's also stealing his dream to sacrifice it to an ancient creature that's frozen below the ice because she let them into the world, but this is unambiguously kindness. And that's interesting because that makes the character more complicated. It's not just that she's evil Ice Witch of the North. Excuse me as I adjust my microphone. It's not just that she's an evil Ice Witch of the North, there is a humanity driving her as well. And that's, again, something that comes back, especially later in the story, something that comes back is Lissandra not just as the untouchable Ice Witch, but as a vulnerable human person who is not as invulnerable as she has to pretend to be to the rest of the world. Anyway, war cries and death screams drag Lissandra south. She can smell blood and fire on the wind and the sharp tang of angry steel. That one's a little bit, like, I like the most of the imagery here, but angry steel is just, I can't, for some reason I can't get behind that one. It just makes me think of a sword with a frowny face scribbled on it. Grass grows here, where the thaw happens. It is not a sunny pasture, but it's the closest thing that most tribes of the Freljord will ever know. The dream spins and distorts. Her knees feel like they will buckle, if that would have any meaning. She steadies herself against the upright timbers of a burning hut. The flames do nothing, they are not real. A shadow falls over her. Long have I waited for this day, witch! Surprisingly, it is one of the Avarosans, a great red-haired brute, his neck bulging with strained arteries. He hefts a notched sword over his head. The bloodlust is plain in his eyes, as he imagines victories he will never see in his lifetime. Nonetheless, he's ready to deliver the final cleaving blow to his sworn enemy. Lissandra has lost count of how many times she has died in someone else's dream. Each time, a piece of her drifts away, never to return. So here again, a little bit of subtle world building going on. Lissandra is not universally beloved in the Freljord. In fact, she is hated by quite a lot of people who would prefer to see her utterly destroyed. And as she says, she's lost count of how many times she has died in someone else's dream. Every time a piece of her drifts away, never to return. So, like, being hated, being the enemy of the Freljord, being, like, the witch and the monster in people's minds, it is taking a toll on her. Like, it hurts her just a little bit that she's the boogeyman that other people, you know, tell nasty stories about and dream about destroying in violence. No, not again, not this time. Great claws of ice close around her to form a shield, entombing her. The warrior's blade does not even chip the surface. He staggers back, roaring defiantly as he... Let him awaken, and believe himself the hero who drove off the ice witch. It was only a dream. The Avarosan tribes will fall, just like the treacherous Harridan from which they took their name. And Lissandra has more pressing concerns. So again, from her perspective, she was betrayed by Avarosa, rather than her betraying Avarosa by letting the void into the world, which, you know, maybe that's a bit of self-delusion, but it also tells you that Lissandra does think of herself as, if not the hero, then at the very least as the protagonist of her own story, like not necessarily the villain. The eye of the storm is most ferocious in the Freljord. The gale roars, lightning flashes, even snowflakes can draw blood. Again, lovely bit of imagery there. Lissandra finds the Spirit Walker channeling this elemental fury. His trance is much like a dream, a bridge between worlds. The storm is a prayer, a direct line to the Ursine's demigod master. Lissandra would spit. That hateful creature is one of the few memories she could not purge from the Freljord no matter how hard she tried. A little bit of background information there. Volibear is commonly believed to be the one who took Lissandra's eyes. Like, it's believed that he's the one who slashed her across the face with his claws and blinded her. So she has a grudge there. It's not clear what she did to piss off Volibear enough for him to attack her, but, you know, suffice it to say she thinks that he was in the wrong. Lightning strikes the shaman multiple times. A toothy maw stretches his jawline. Fingernails blacken into claws. It is neither man nor bear, but something else entirely. All its life will be much like a dream. No sleep, no joy, only the storm. Lissandra edges closer, looking for anything she can use in the roiling madness. Then the shaman's frightful gaze snaps to her, and she finds herself face to face with an avatar of the Volibear himself. Without thought, Lissandra lashes out with cleaving spikes of true eyes pulled from the earth around them. She tries to snare the creature's limbs, to slow it, for even just... Dark blood stains the snow. Thunder rolls around the distant peaks. The twisted shaman falls to his knees, his body torn between the shape of what he was and what he might have become. It is a kindness, really, for his mind is still mostly his own. Other eyes shine out from the storm. These shape-changers are not the threat they once were. They are a battle for another time. For now, their delirium will serve well enough. And again, world building for the Freljord, we are introduced to a different faction of people who live there, and the kind of stuff that they get up to, and how that relates specifically to Lissandra and to her faction. Lissandra warily circles the Watcher beneath the ice. Actually, give me a second. I need to sit down. I've been standing up. This is the peril of recording these things in one stretch, is, if my back starts hurting, I have to adjust for it on the fly. Anyway, Lissandra warily circles the Watcher beneath the ice. She can see her own tiny body on the surface above them. Her pale, corpse-like flesh is almost as white as freshly driven snow. The beast is barely aware of her presence. It is like some monstrous mewling newborn. In the dreams of the Watchers there is nothing, and more nothing, and more nothing. A horizon of nothing framed by mountains of nothing. Above all that nothing, a sky of nothing, with dense clouds of nothing. In the face of all that nothing, Lissandra fights to remain something. So I like this as a concept for imagery. Like, you have this landscape made of nothing, but that nothing still contorts into shapes that would be recognizable to a human mind, because it's a human mind that's interacting with them. I think maybe it pulls it off a little bit, like a nothing and nothing and nothing and nothing, a horizon of nothing, mountains of nothing, above all that nothing, a sky of nothing with dense clouds. And maybe that's a little bit too much. I think we kind of got the point by, like, here. But I like the idea. And I like the idea that in the face of all that nothing, Lissandra fights to remain something. Again, like this short little burst of a phrase that just tells you, that sums up a little bit of what's going on within the story. And that's sort of the main thing about the whole void as a concept in the League of Legends lore, is that the void is a dimension of absolute nothingness, and existence itself kind of hurts it. Like, it annoys the void that there could be a place where there is something. It's kind of like, you know, the ways in which gas will rush in to fill a vacuum, sort of the same way that the void would like to rush in and fill all the something of Runeterra up with the nothing of itself. Anyway, the abyss yawns around her. She watches the black sun devour her avatar, but no matter how much it pulls into its maw, there is always more for it to eat. This is very good. She screams and explodes into dark fractals that divide into billions of Lissandras, every one of them screaming. Against all the nothing, the sound is barely even a whisper, and yet even that is enough to rattle the dream to its very foundations. Her barely conscious body traces glyphs on the surface of the true ice barrier. It is an old spell born of a fire, now long extinguished. And this, I have to assume, would be the sacrifice that Lissandra made of many thousands of people and Yeti and just living things in order to seal the Watchers in the void, in the abyss. She scrawls in spasms and convulsions. Her movements are desperate, jerking, clumsy. Only a shred of her spirit remains in her body. And then, in a rush, most of her returns. She vomits watery bile onto the ice and curls up as it freezes around her. Below, the writhing shadow sleeps again. It dreams of eating her for a little while longer, and that dream buys it the only measure of peace its kind ever seemed to desire. Peace. It is something Lissandra never experiences. Not anymore. She dresses herself and returns to ascend the worn steps. The Frost Guard await her leadership and guidance. She will find no peace in this life. That is a small price to pay to keep the beasts slumbering, dreaming, gnawing. So again, like I talked about, big part of the point of the story is to present Lissandra as vulnerable, as not powerful, as not in control, but rather someone who's essentially tap dancing on, like, tap dancing on a thin line stretched across an infinite yawning void that is threatening to consume not just her, but everything at every moment. She's someone who's just barely kind of... Yeah, they're frozen in ice, and they're probably going to stay frozen there for at least another couple of centuries, but she's always kind of on the edge of disaster. She's always tap dancing right on the bleeding edge of where she can't hold things together anymore. And that comes across pretty well here. She's barely conscious. She's like convulsing and spasming and desperately trying to scratch out the magical incantations that will hold the void back for another few moments. And she's not powerful. She's not in control. She's desperate, jerking, clumsy, and when she finally gets most of herself back, not all of herself, but most of herself, because a sacrifice had to be made to keep those things down, she vomits watery bile onto the ice and curls up as it freezes around her. That's a pathetic image. And I mean pathetic in the classical sense of pathetic as in evoking pathos. It's, you kind of feel bad for her a little bit. Like, that's... Whatever else is going on, she's not having fun being the villain of the Freljord. She's not enjoying herself. And that's it adds a lot of complexity to the character. It makes her far more interesting and makes it much, much more fascinating to tell stories about her than if she was just, you know, a cartoon villain. Anyway, we're getting to the end soon, I promise. Blistering winds lashed the orphaned Iceborn's cheeks almost bloody. Her nose went numb an hour ago. Or was it 2? It doesn't matter. Nothing matters, because whenever she closes her eyes, she sees the witch. Silhouetted against the never-setting sun, the woman rides a beast of ice, bone, and dark magic, and dazzles in a gown of freshly fallen snow. The horned helm that covers her eyes gives her the impression of her head rising out into the stars. Parched black lips part to offer horrific prophecies. Wreath, I see you. The Ice Witch has never failed to make a dramatic entrance into Wreath's dreams. The darkness grins, she continues, and says to me, ice and lies make desperate tools. I implore my hand to curl into a fist, to pluck out the ever-watchful eye, to impale it upon a spike of ice, before the wind howls its song only to the widening abyss. Wreath's eyelashes have frozen shut. Now it hurts to tear them apart. But she must. The longer they're stuck together, the harder it will be to break them open. She cries out and feels hot blood trickle down her cheek. She fogs a piece of ice with her breath and rubs it until she can see her reflection. The split in the corner of her eyelid is not too bad. But in that reflection, she sees that she is not alone in her sheltered cave. So, orphans brought up again. Like, that was planted earlier. We know that there's a bunch of orphans in the Freljord. And we know that there's one specific orphan that Lissandra has been keeping her eyes on. This one right here. So, like, we're bringing this character back. An emaciated man shivers at the entrance, with early morning light casting its blue tint over his face. Then Wreath realizes this is no fanciful illusion. The man's skin is blue and translucent. His movements are haggard and stiff, as though he's trying to reawaken his failing joints. It's cold, said the haggardly man. I knew this as I lay dying. Wreath skitters backwards on her palms and heels away from him. I have no food, she calls out, hating the fear in her own voice. Little shelter, there's nothing for you to take from me. The man tilts his head. I am of no hunger. No shelter shields me. I saw this cave and you, as her frost clouded my eyes. Our paths like rivers meeting. I knew this as I lay dying. Died often, have you? Just the once was enough. You... Wreath hesitates, unsure of herself in that moment. You saw the witch too? No. But I hear the witch in my veins. In every moment. With every beat of my once still heart. He holds out his blackened hand to her. There are others, little Iceborn. Others we must meet. And there are many miles to tread in each other's company. And you knew all this as you lay dying? Death reveals much, little Iceborn. Wreath stands slowly, warily. Who are you? She asks. I am no one anymore. I am but a passenger in my own body. My name is frozen over. But you may call me Shamble. And I shall call you... Wreath of the Narrowfoot clan. Well then come, Wreath. Iceborn of Narrowfoot. The others are near. She does not move. And who are they? So this is the man who lay dying in the cave. The man Lissandra showed some kindness, but who has clearly been negatively affected by the experience of being touched by dreams of the void in his dying moments. And now he is something like an ice zombie, something along those lines, a revenant of some kind, who knows? It's not explained, and it kind of doesn't need to be. The spires of the Frostguard Citadel rise from the frozen landscape. Waves of magical aurorae, greens, pinks, and blues, dance in a sky that is almost always night. The stars twinkle eternally here, in the coldest and cleanest air. Few know how to find this hidden fortress. There are many in this world who would raise an army and race it to the ground. Those who do find the Citadel rarely leave on their own terms. Even so, 5 weary figures trudge down from the rocky mountain pass through the hidden wound in the very fabric of the Freljord. They seek the Ice Switch. Like so many others through the centuries, they each met Lissandra in their dreams. But now they each feel something else deep inside. Something beneath the ice. Something dark and empty. Hungry. Gnawing. So this is how Lissandra recruits followers. Like 5 weary figures. Guess how many sections and how many dreams Lissandra wandered into? 5. So this seems to be how Lissandra creates followers. She shows them exactly what's hiding at the bottom of the Freljord. The fate that awaits the world if she should fail in her duties. And so they come to her, because they begin to feel that presence too. Like, they experience the same thing that she does, that a small part of themselves is stolen away by the void, in exactly the same way that it happens to Lissandra. And I like that a lot. Like, again, it adds complexity that the Frost Guard is not just a bunch of crazy fanatics, but that maybe they too have some deeper and quite terrifying motivations for being as loyal to Lissandra as they are. All in all, this is a very good story, I think. Like, it does a hell of a lot of work building on the Freljord, and also expanding on Lissandra's character itself. It provides the opportunity for alternate perspectives on characters like Ash and Sejuani and Cyrilda and Avarosa, like the other 3 of the 3 sisters who are like these legendary figures in the Freljord. It tells us that Lissandra definitely also has a perspective on the fates of her her former sisters and why they had to die, and that in her mind, like, at this point, pretty much everything is justified because it keeps the void at bay, this world-ending threat that cannot be allowed to surge into Runeterra. Like, from her perspective, every sacrifice is worth it, including the minds and dreams of random innocents, or not-so-innocents, that she passes through as she tries to feed them to the monsters that she herself led into the world. So, very good story. I recommend that you read it for yourself as well, like without my constant interruptions. There's a link to it down in the description below. And if you have enjoyed reading through some League of Legends lore with me, then I highly encourage you to hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons, because those buttons, when you click them, numbers go up internally on YouTube, and numbers going up is the only thing that YouTube actually really cares about. Like, it's how YouTube channels get to stay alive. Also, you can hit the bell icon. I just learned today that they also track that. That's also a thing that they track, which is like, oh god, so many stats and statistics that I have to increase in order for YouTube to allow me to do what I do. Besides that, if you want to help the channel more directly than that, if you want to support the work that I do here, I do have a Patreon for that specific purpose. You can sign up for $1 a month if you're so inclined, and I would be very grateful for that help. If you don't want to sign up for a monthly subscription, then I have a tip jar down in the description as well, where you can give me a one-time tip to say, hey, you sure had a lot of thoughts and feelings about this relatively short story. That's here. I'll give you $3 for that for some reason that I won't disclose to you, but you'll just have to wonder about it in the dark of the night thinking, why would anyone give you money to do this? So yeah, the tip jars are there for that. Merchandise store, that also exists. I have one of those because, you know, I guess why not? There's some nice stuff on there. You can go and have a look. If you don't want to support me directly, that's, of course, completely okay. Believe me, I understand. Like, things are tough all over. But at the end of my videos, I do encourage people to, generally speaking, support the content creators whose work they enjoy. And the reason why is because, well, first of all, none of us want to be tied to the algorithm all of the time. And the only way not to be tied to the algorithm is to, well, have direct support elsewhere. So direct support is the thing that helps content creators not have to chase the algorithm or do clickbait. But also because, especially for early content creators, like people who are starting out or who don't have that many subscribers, $1 donations can be literally the same as thousands of views on a video. Like, if they get $1 or $2 donations after a video, that can, like, more than triple how well their video has effectively done. And it matters a great deal. Those small donations, that $1 or $2, that feels like it's nothing and like the person in question wouldn't even care about it, it matters so much more than you think. It makes a huge amount of difference, relatively speaking. So if there is an online content creator whose work you enjoy, whether it's me or someone else, please consider supporting them directly with literally anything you can spare, whenever you can, because believe me when I say it's so much more important than you think it is. Anyway, if you haven't enjoyed this video, then there is a dislike button down below, and you can hit it if you like. It slumbers, it sleeps deeply, and it hasn't woken yet. No one knows what'll happen when it does. You could probably hit it one more time, and we'd all still be safe. I'm sure nothing would happen. Thank you very much for watching.